Looking to enhance your D&D storytelling? Then you need to start by improving your descriptions. Today, I'll walk you through 7 simple tips to help you to polish your narration. We're talking picking the right order, using the right words, and becoming comfortable describing anything your game might need so that you can have more of those wow moments that make your night. It's pretty common advice in creating descriptions for us to utilize all 5 senses, but that advice is terrible. Trying to involve all senses into every description is not only completely exhausting, but it can start to feel a little on the artificial side. However, there is truth, of course, to the fact that if you include more than one sense into your descriptions, you are going to engage different portions of a player's brain and create a more evocative experience. But the challenge comes in deciding when enough is enough or when you're putting too much into your description. Unfortunately, this is a little more art than science, but my advice would be for you to always describe what a scene looks like, and then typically add what it sounds like, and then occasionally add a third sense. Focusing on what players see and hear will cover the majority of information, and then trickling in that dose of the acrid sense that they pick up with their nose, or the rough feel of the wall, or the unevenness of the cobbled floor. Focusing on what your players see and hear gives them the primary information that they need to be able to interact with the world, and then sprinkling in little pieces of touch or taste or smell into your descriptions is a great way to enhance and add flavor without bogging things down by trying to figure out what somebody tastes when they're walking down your average stone corridor. Another way you can improve your descriptions is to find tools that will help you. There's been a lot of hate for box text in Dungeons & Dragons over the years, to the point where for a while products were being released that didn't include it at all. I'm looking at you, Mad Mage. Until people realized just how important and impactful good box text can be. It isn't always intended or needed to be read verbatim, but having quality text that already tells us what a scene looks like can provide us with the tools we need to improvise from there and create evocative experiences for our players. Which is why I'm excited about this video's sponsor, Describe, and their vast collection of ready-made descriptions. If you wanted just one tool to quickly level up your descriptions, you can't go wrong with their professionally crafted box text. Particularly if you combine it with their awesome map collection, a collection pulled from various talented artists, which have then been enhanced with specific details all around the map, so that when your player asks, "What's this little thing over in the corner here?" you not only have an answer to riff off of, but you have a professionally crafted block of text that gives you specific details involving the senses and making you look like you have prepared the answer for every question with a quality description that's going to pique their interest. I like to use the descriptions as a starting point for my own encounters and features at the table, so that I can take a single map and turn it into an entire adventure by riffing off of the text that they've given me. If having nearly unlimited inspiration and award-winning descriptive talent at your fingertips sounds useful to you, then check out describe.com/DMTimothy and use my name for an extended 30-day trial on any subscription. You can find the link down in the description below. Apropos, right? Another trick is to use fantastic names. By focusing on the reason for the name of a place and giving it an interesting one and referring to it by that name later in your adventure, you not only allow yourself to imagine the scene that you're in and come up with more descriptive elements, but you also shortcut in your players' minds those descriptions when you're returning to a location later in an adventure. A name is kind of like a picture in that it can reiterate 1,000 words that you've used to describe something in a simple phrase. The sly flourish approach is to name your locations first so that you can create the details, but it can work in reverse if you have some of the details already figured out, and it also works if you not only name the overall location, but individual elements around a room. A blood-stained butcher's block creates a much more vivid mental image for you to go into and provides you with details about what happens in a room, a lot more than saying there's a table in the room. By assigning names with significance to the various items around a room and referring to them in that fashion, you're going to increase your descriptive power and in particular lessen the number of words you have to use when you are referring to something a second and a third time. Which takes us right into our next tip. And this tip is my biggest weakness: talk less. Sometimes in our rush to make sure that our players see all the interesting things that we've crammed into a space, we try and try and try to tell every single detail about the room as soon as they glance inside of it. Given that sometimes they're glancing inside of it during the middle of a combat round because they accidentally drew the goblin guards in the next space and are chasing them down, it can get a little bit outrageous for people to be listening to these 5-minute diatribes when really we just want to get on to find out whether or not the goblin gets shot in the back. Part of the problem that I feel and the stress that drives me to continue to describe a room is that I worry about my players missing out on things that I feel are important or interesting that they will be intrigued by. Part of that falls from the mistaken idea that I will only get to describe a room once. In actuality, sometimes the best way to describe a room is not to go into all of the details, but to provide a rough framework that allows people to show what they are interested in. And if we don't manage to tantalize them with our first pass of description, then when they do something in the room, throw in an additional piece of information or two by holding back some of those finer details until somebody decides they cross through the room or they're going to turn to leave. And giving those little details, we extend the use of our description and improve the likelihood that our players are going to engage with it for a longer period of time and increase the odds that they'll actually get drawn in by one of the details. Because the details that you mention during that long diatribe can glaze over in your players' minds as they're waiting for their chance to act. But those short, snappy details that you point out to them in between turns tend to get a more immediate response. So while I'm currently spending a whole bunch of time talking about describing here and now, at the game, descriptions should be kept short, sweet, and to the point. And knowing how to do that means knowing what order to describe things in. I have a pretty simple system for determining what order to describe things in that goes pretty much like this. Start wide, get close. Start big, get small. Start boring, get interesting. Start vague, get specific. As mentioned before, descriptions can feel a little bit long for some of our players at various points in time. When we're describing a room, scene, or situation, we're talking about describing a huge number of details that our eyes could pick up in a half a second flat. And unfortunately, while our eyes can focus out on all these different points and can figure out how to convey that information to our brain, we don't necessarily do a great job of it when we're trying to verbalize. So when you're crafting a description, whether you're doing it on the fly or beforehand, it's important to get the broad strokes and the less exciting things out of the way first. The moment that you mention that there's a salivating monster that is about to leap out of the shadows, you have pretty much lost the rest of the room when it comes to describing and having your players care about any of those details. So when you describe a room, start with the broadest sense that you can of that room. Give the largest details that are the least interesting or the least likely to stand out to your players so that their brains can pull those in when you lose them with the more specific, more exciting, and interesting detail that you save for last. If something demands action, then you should not mention it until the very end of your description. I feel like this next point feels very parenty of me. You should read more. Seriously. My morning routine includes reading a poem, a short story, an essay on D&D, and watching a YouTube video about D&D, because I know that when it comes to output, Input is your friend. You don't have to be huge into reading, and you could be focused instead on visual media, but if you're going to want to be able to describe something in words, the written word and the spoken word are a lot more valuable than that which you actually see. Reading and listening with intention is what I'm talking about and is incredibly valuable. Taking note of particularly evocative phrases, cool names, or descriptions is a great way to cement them into your mind so that you can regurgitate them later. You can go so far as stealing like an artist and taking this idea whole cloth for your campaign in order to deliver something similar, or you can simply allow those words to percolate so that you can connect the dots when it comes time to give out a description of your own. Either way, if you want to master describing things, one of the best ways to do so is to study masters of describing things. And after study, just like all other school-like endeavors, comes practice. Because if you want to be great at describing things, you need to do it frequently. Doing it at the table is great, but I find that practicing away from the table, when the pressure is not on you, is a great way for you to be able to write, rewrite, and dive into the nitty-gritty of good descriptions and create pathways in your brain that will allow you to deliver that on the fly when it's needed. Try to write or verbalize a description of something in your life, an actual item, person, or place that you know or are around, and then read it back to yourself to see whether or not that creates the same kind of mental picture, or ask somebody else to judge your work if you're feeling that bold. Going right back to the hate for boxed descriptions, we don't usually advise people to write their own boxed text, even if we do tell them to go and use it from published modules. But there is value in taking the time to write down your descriptions, and if it's something that you're looking to master, choosing to do it now does not mean that you have to be doing it for every adventure, every scene, and every scenario for the rest of time. Take time to add to your prep the writing of one description every week, and over the course of a year, you're going to find a great deal of improvement at your table. Don't forget to snag your extended trial on any subscription at Describe.com by using the code DMTimothy. You can get there through this link up here or find it in the description down below. Thanks so much for watching. Happy adventuring.